But there's something else that goes into this that drives up the cost, that makes affordability a bigger problem. And those are all of the rules and regulations. Here to talk about those, Kyle Conan, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Kyle, thank you so very much for taking some time. Thanks for joining us here on this Tuesday morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben.
I'm not putting too big of a exclamation point on this. Am I to say that rules and regulations make it more expensive to live in Wisconsin, whether it's local rules or state rules? So let me set the stage with this question. Just how many rules and regulations does Wisconsin have? How do we compare against our neighbors? Where are we nationally?
Yeah, so Wisconsin has 165,000 restrictions on the books. So if you think about it this way, these are rules that have words that you must do something or you cannot do something. So that's really the only good way to measure it. But when you look at Wisconsin, we're not in a great place. Nationally ranked 13th overall, and 13th is not great. In the Midwest, we have the second highest level of regulation, second only to Illinois. It's kind of surprising that even Minnesota is beating us in that category. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to reduce that burden on businesses and our populace, because you're 100% right that regulation hits every aspect of our life. It may not be the sexiest topic on earth, but the cost of your home, the cost of childcare, the cost of your energy bills, which are skyrocketing, all have to do with how we regulate.
This red tape reset, and that's what Will's part of a coalition pushing this handful of pieces of legislation at the Capitol that would roll back regulations. The line in here, if we get rid of just 20% of these rules, we could save $2.5 billion. Give me an example. Is there something that you can say, this rule right here, or maybe this group of rules, this is why that is more expensive?
Yeah, I think there's a handful that have just advanced in recent months here. Last year, there was a court decision by the state Supreme Court. It's the Markline versus Evers decision. And what it did was it overturned some of the oversight authority that the legislature has over the rulemaking process. As a result of that, a number of state agencies either did or attempted to advance expensive regulations. And I think two prime ones that come to mind. The first one's a rewrite of our building codes. So essentially what they did was they tried to pass building code revisions last year. The legislature blocked them, and they brought it forward anyways after this court case. And I think from that decision, we're going to see true impacts on the cost of building new commercial buildings, and that includes apartments. So expect rents to rise. And it's a lot of things that are kind of gold casting and not that are wants and not needs. So things like excessive insulation and things like that, climate goals along those lines. So the other thing that one of the state agencies attempted to push forward was a hike in cattle fees, and this might not be something that impacts everyone, but it all gets passed down. And one of the fees that they looked to increase was 1,700% over the current amount. That's going to get passed down when you go and buy your hamburger at the corner bar down the street here. So
or your gallon of milk, or your thing of yogurt, or your thing of cheese. Look, milk comes from cows, and if you charge a bunch for cows, you're going to hurt the dairy land that is the state of Wisconsin. We're talking with Kyle Conan. He's with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. I linked up his Twitter, his X. If you just go find mine, you can find him. All the great stuff that they do over at Will. Some of this is creep, right? And we can bash the liberal gals on the court for their terrible decision to turn Tony Evers into a king. But I'm imagining that there is somebody who works for government who says, well, Ben, we need these kinds of rules. They keep people safe and they make the bill. I'm sure we have rules that maybe started out as good ideas, but because either of new laws or because of technology, they're no longer needed. How much of the problem here is that we just haven't gone through and cut out the old duplicate unnecessary regulations that remain part of that 165,000 restriction number?
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. Technology evolves, and oftentimes our rules don't keep up with that. And I think kind of the prime example to look at is the state of Virginia, right? They're also a purple state. Governor Youngkin there did an initiative to kind of go through and streamline their rules process there and take some of these old regulations off the books. When he came into office, he set an ambitious goal of reducing their regulations by 25%. They exceeded that. He'll be out of office, I think, next week, and they'll be around 35% of their regulations have been reduced. So I think that's probably analogous and something that we could really look to in Wisconsin here for something analogous to cutting that. So I think it's a real problem, and this bill package is kind of the start of that solution.
Is there a state that we should be following? You talked a little bit about Virginia there, but how they do this in Florida, in Texas, and some of the red states that have pro-growth agendas. Is this something that is common? Are we trying to catch up, or are we still just sort of stuck behind Illinois or right next to Illinois with the old idea of, I'm from the government, I've got an ID and a clipboard, and I can help you?
Yeah, surprisingly, Texas is one of the most regulated states in the country. That probably goes against everything we all think. But, yeah, Florida is a prime example. But I think the states that have really been leaders on this are Virginia. Idaho cut over 90% of their code in a span of 4 years, and the sky hasn't fallen there. So Ohio's done a lot. Oklahoma's done some. There's a lot of states that have picked up this mantle of saying we need to really go back and look at our regulatory burden and take care of this. I'll note that, we're ranked 13th now. If we cut our regulations by just 20% here in Wisconsin, we quickly catch up to the middle of the pack. So it's an achievable goal to say we can cut our regulations here by 20% and really supercharge economic growth here. I think you had mentioned cutting 20% in the next couple of years here. We could grow Wisconsin's economy by $23 billion in the next decade. That's real.
I'm going to have a real regulation question about power bills to close this out, but we're talking with Kyle Conan. He's with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. They're part of a statewide coalition pushing the red tape reset. And AFP, yep, I can absolutely see them on board. FGA, the Foundation for Government Accountability. IRG, Institute for Reforming Government, MacGyver, a lot of free market sort of think tank places, but the builders are on this. Associated Builders and Contractors, they're a part of this. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce, they're on board with this. So this is not just a bunch of think tank conservatives, people who actually do real work. I said we could kick the liberal gals on the Supreme Court, and this is where I want to do this. I'm not overstating it with the ruling against the lawmakers from last year. This has opened the door to state agencies governing by rule, governing by fiat. Lawmakers can't vote these things down. They never come before the legislature. How much worse could it get if we get a Democratic administration who just decides we're going to make rules and regulations and restrictions, and there's nothing you can do about it?
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify that before this decision, the legislature had tools to pause or block agency rules that exceeded their statutory authority. And after the decision, those tools are all gone. So just some practical hypotheticals of things that could get through without change. Think about clean energy mandates that drive up electricity costs, right? We have a 10% renewable mandate now in Wisconsin. That could go up if a Democratic governor or a liberal governor wanted to push that. Environmental rules that drive up the cost of a home. One of the practical examples of what they did in Virginia was they cut the cost of building a home by $24,000. When you gain that out over 30 years on a mortgage, it's significant money. You could have more stringent child care licensing standards that make it more expensive to get child care. These are all things that contribute to the affordability problem, and it's kind of free range right now. The only branch that really has the opportunity to stop these regulations is the courts, and I think, as you and I both know, we can't trust them at this moment to be an effective backstop.
This court is never going to say no to a rule from the agency experts or the do-gooders. I'm going to get you out on this question, and this is a Ben question. This isn't for the listeners. This isn't for the story. This is Ben really, really, really hopes this, and I understand how difficult. It's always dangerous as a lawyer and a talk show host to ask a question that you don't know the answer to, because I could end up looking really stupid here. I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that because a lot of these rules and regulations and restrictions come from a governor through the agencies, that some of these bad regulations could be reversed by a better governor. I'm really hoping that there's something that maybe a Governor Tom Tiffany could do to roll back these rules and make our power bills cheaper. I really do think that the cost of electricity is going to be a huge issue in the 2026 election. And I think it's something, please tell me if I'm right or wrong, that we could lower the cost, not make it free or anything, but just chip away at that tick, tick, tick through rolling back things like that 10% green energy mandate. Is that something that a good governor could do?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And if it's not reducing the cost of energy, it's at least bending that cost curve so it's not going up as fast as it is. I think we've all been shocked with our heating bills this past month here, but I think that's exactly what a reform-minded governor could do. Bend the cost curve on a lot of these items. Energy being at the top of that list, I think, is exactly right.
Bring down the cost of my We Energies bill. Make it cheaper to build new homes, which makes it cheaper to sell new homes. Build more homes. Let's start with that. And all of a sudden, the affordability question, we can roll back. Because it's going to take a while. It's going to take legislatures. It's going to take courts to deal with Act 10, to deal with Tony Evers' 400-year veto. But if we can use this kind of king-like power to roll back regulations, that's affordability in a can. Kyle Conan, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Find him online. Find him on X. Kyle, thanks so very much for at least bailing me out with that last question and not saying, well, Ben, you're a moron and you completely read this situation wrong. There's nothing with. Thank you so much for making me look like a smart talk show host this morning.
Oh, you're one of the smartest, Ben. Appreciate it.